Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? So hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Meg Bouvier. You know me as the creator of your NIH Grantsmanship course library. I have nearly 40 years of experience at NIH, first as a scientist, a bench scientist, then as a staff writer for longtime director, Dr. Francis Collins, then as an intramural researcher, as an applicant, and then as a full-time grant trainer. So I have helped clients land nearly 700 million in federal funding, and I'm here to answer your grant writing questions. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. So if you are attending live, I just want to remind people that you're in listen-only mode, but you can begin to book questions into the Q&A box. So feel free to start loading up the box with questions. And if you are watching this as a recording, and more people are doing that, both in our course library and on our YouTube channel, just a reminder that today is April 29th, 2026, and everything is true to the best of my knowledge as of today, but things change quickly at NIH. So be sure to double check anything and make sure that it has not been updated. So things that you should know, we just released an updated course, Master the T32. So this is a 3-chapter writing course on writing institutional training grants. So that is available on your course library as of today. It's fully updated. I think I recorded it less than a month ago. I think it was on at the tail end of March. I recorded that. And in terms of things that are coming up, May 1st is Friday. So if you have not yet registered for our virtual office hours, First Fridays, that URL is in the chat right now. And you can sign up for that. It's just a casual drop-in session. It starts at 11:30 Eastern time. It's the first Friday of every month. And at those sessions, I do enable people to speak, and you can discuss your issues with me. You don't have to sign up for a time or anything. And it's just, there are people lurking to learn, but it's just kind of a casual office hours. It's not recorded so that it preserves people's confidentiality in terms of their projects, but do be aware that there are people lurking on the call and listening in while we're talking. Okay, so as I said, feel free to start loading up the chat. We are going to get started with loading up the Q&A box with your questions, and we're going to get started with today's mini tutorial, which is on the NIH R15 mechanism. Okay, so I am going to share some slides and a hold on one sec. It's always tricky to do this when I have multiple monitors open. Okay, and I see people putting in questions about the tutorial and about other topics as well. Okay, let's see. All right, I'm gonna see if I can get this to work. Okay, are people seeing the, nope, you're not seeing the presenter view. I can see that. Let's try a different screen. I always forget to close out all my screens when I do this. Okay, is everybody seeing this as a presenter view now? You should be seeing this as a presenter view, I hope. So, okay, so I just threw together a mini tutorial on this because I used to have a talk on the R15 that I would kind of travel around and give to various places. I don't do that as much anymore, simply because organizations don't have the money to invest, particularly R15 organizations don't have that kind of money to invest anymore. But I still had some slides, and I just kind of updated them, and then preserved some of the key tips that I wanted to share with you. So, and this also kind of gives you a flavor if you haven't gone and looked at any of my courses yet, what my courses are like. They're very much like this, where I kind of methodically walk through an outline like this. I know that this topic is not necessarily relevant to every one of our members, but as of like 2 months ago or 3 months ago, we have 2 team memberships that are R15 eligible. So I did want to just kind of give a little overview of what this is. So we're going to talk about what the R15 program is, what the goal is. I'm going to give you an overview, and we're going to look at the NIH website so I can give you an idea of the information there. We're going to talk about the 2 types of eligibility for an R15, and then I'll give you some brief writing tips. So here's some information about the program goal, and I'll just say very briefly, the whole point of an R15 is to help level the playing field so that organizations that historically have not had a strong research focus, such as like an undergraduate teaching institution, can compete in a smaller pond against organizations that look like you. So if you're at, like I'm in Western Massachusetts, an example of an organization like this might be a small liberal arts college like Mount Holyoke College, which is right down the road from me. So if you're at a place like that where there aren't a lot of core facilities and there's not a lot of federal funding and there's a heavy teaching load, you're not putting in an R-level application at NIH and competing against like Harvard Medical School. You're competing against people at organizations like yours. So it's a way of leveling the playing field. And as such, if you are R15 eligible, it is almost always the right decision to apply for an R15 rather than another type of R where you're going to be a little fish in a big pond and competing against those larger organizations that have access to much more resources than your organization might. So the program goals are to stimulate research in educational institutions that provide baccalaureate or advanced degrees for a significant number of the nation's research scientists, but haven't been major recipients of NIH funding in the past, and to create opportunities for scientists and institutions unlikely to participate extensively in NIH research programs to contribute to the research effort in the nation and to support small research projects at eligible domestic institutions, and importantly, to expose undergraduates and/or graduates, but typically undergraduates, to research projects and strengthen research environments at institutions. So the part about exposing students is a big part of this, and we're going to talk more about that in a moment. So let's talk a little bit about the eligibility, and I'm going to show you this website after I finish my talk. But right now, Riley is going to drop this URL in the chat for us, and I'm going to return to that after I'm done with the talk. We've talked about what the R15 is. There are 2 types, an area and a REAP. One is for undergraduate institutions, and one is for health-focused organizations, like a medical school or a school of public health. I'm going to show you at the end a flow chart for establishing eligibility. But in brief, the PI has to be eligible, which typically means that they have to be at an R15 eligible school. That has to be their primary appointment. And the school has to be eligible in terms of how much money it has had. I think it's $6 million in not more than $6 million in 4 of the last 7 years. But what I want to say, and this is the part that often confuses people, is that even if your school is not R15 eligible, sometimes people can designate their department as R15 eligible or their division as R15 eligible. And the ways in which that is allowed to occur seems to vary quite a bit by institute and even by program officer. So For example, I have a client where they have a school of public health, and there are certain departments in this school of public health, kinesiology and bioepidemiology, biostatistics and epidemiology, which have historically landed lots of NIH funding. But there are many other departments, such as the Department of Nutrition in this school of public health, that have not historically landed much in the way of federal funding. And I have had clients in places like that designate just their department as R15 eligible, even though the entire School of Public Health is not eligible. So eligibility can be a little bit of a tricky thing. In years gone by, NIH used to maintain a list of ineligible institutions, and I found that even then there was sometimes some wiggle room, so that, for example, in the example that I just gave you, this particular university was on the ineligible list, but this applicant was able to designate the department as R15 eligible. So we're going to talk more about that when I return to the at the end and show you the website. And on that website, I'm going to show you a list of active notices of funding opportunity, NOFOs. There used to be parent announcements only. Now there are other types, and I'll show you that at the end of the talk. So just kind of bookmark this. And I know that I wanted to do this in part as a PowerPoint because I know that some of you are going to want this PowerPoint at the end. So if you do, just email me, meg@bouviergrant.com, and I'll send you a PDF of this PowerPoint. So in terms of the organizational, in terms of the structure of the grant, it's typically 300,000 in direct costs over 3 years. It isn't always that, but that's very typically what it is. And that would be by basis of comparison. So for example, an R03 is smaller, it's 2 years, and the dollar amount can vary, but it's usually somewhere around 100,000. An R21 would be 2 years, and that's usually about 275,000 in directs, although that can vary depending on the NOFO. An R34 is 3 years and is usually about 450,000, and an R01 per year is typically capped at 500,000 in directs and can go up to 5 years. So that kind of gives you a sense of where in this continuum the R15 falls. So it is smaller than an R01. It is a little bit larger than an R21 in terms of dollar amount, because the R21 is usually 275 in directs. But it's, again, if you're at an R15 eligible organization, it is almost always the right decision to apply for the R15 over, for example, an R01, where you're going to be competing against organizations that have far more resources typically than you would have at your organization. So in terms of the eligibility, the school has to be eligible. So an R15 eligible domestic institution should offer baccalaureate or advanced degrees in health-related sciences. And a school may be ineligible, but your division or department might be eligible. So really important to check on that. Then the PI of the grant also has to qualify as eligible apart from the school's eligibility. So they have to have their primary appointment at an R15 eligible school. They can't be a PI on an active NIH research grant at the time of the award of the R15. You can't have more than one R15 at a time as a PI. You should be able to demonstrate some experience supervising, because so much of the R15 is about exposing students to topics in science so that you might stimulate their interest in a career down the line in science. And I'll talk about that more in the next section. You must have opportunities available for students to be exposed to research, which sounds like kind of an obvious thing and a no-brainer, but you would be surprised at how often somebody comes to me with they're at a place that has a teaching focus and they are interested in submitting an R15, but they don't really have any kind of research going on right now where they could kind of use that as a way to expose students to the scientific research enterprise. So that's like a non-starter on an R15. And there must be the potential to strengthen the research environment at your organization. In terms of the other key personnel, so this would be your co-investigators, collaborators, and consultants. This is a question I get all the time. Those folks do not have to be at an R15 eligible school, nor do they themselves have to be R15 eligible. So if you are a PI who is R15 eligible and your school is R15 eligible, one way to kind of increase your capacity for offering training experiences and research exposure for students is by partnering with somebody who is at a non-R15 eligible, like an R1 university in your area. That's like a very typical scenario when people are putting together an R15 application. So let's wrap up with the writing tips. So the key thing to remember here is that an R15 absolutely is not a training or mentoring grant. So nowhere in your application should you use words like training, mentoring, or fellowship. You should never use words like that. This is the number one confusing point that people have when they're writing an R15. You're exposing students, usually undergrads, to the research enterprise in the hopes of stimulating interest in a career in STEM. But you are not training them, you are not mentoring them. This is not a fellowship grant of any kind. There should be no training or mentoring plan whatsoever. There shouldn't be a plan for any coursework or seminars or professional development activities. So nothing like that. So what you are going to do is describe how students will be included in hands-on mentoring research, meritorious research, describe activities that undergrads and or graduate students will participate in, and how the project will stimulate the students' interest in STEM, in potential careers in science. And you want to find ways to involve students that are intellectually stimulating. Experience driven is often the phrase that people use in these applications, and significant to research. So it kind of begs the question, like, well, what are those things? These are the kinds of things that people typically propose for their students. So a student can design experiments and controls, they can execute and troubleshoot experiments, they can help collect and analyze data, they can participate in lab meetings to discuss results and to plan future experiments, they can present at those lab meetings, they can help with drafting journal articles, and they would be considered collaborators in this enterprise. So those are a list of very typical activities that a person would propose for their students. In addition, I want to make clear that the PI in their biosketch, in the personal statement, should include a summary of previous or current experience supervising undergraduates and or graduate students specifically in research, not academic counseling or advising, but specifically supervising them in the research enterprise. And anywhere that you list publications, and there are multiple places on an NIH biosketch where you might do that, anywhere where you list publications, you should indicate which peer-reviewed publications or products involved undergraduate and or graduate students under your supervision. So, and that's a typo there. It says grand students. So it should be grad students. Obviously, the more experience you have supervising students, the better, and the more publications you have that involve students, the better. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share of that, and then we're going to I'm going to share this web page, which is probably your this should probably be your first stop if you are considering an R15. So again, the URL for this, those of you who are watching this as a video and don't have access to the chat, here is the URL up here. Those who are watching this live and have access to the chat, the URL is in the chat. So this is going to be your first stop if you're going to do an R15. So it kind of runs through the purpose. It explains how this is fairly new, like within, I want to say the last 5 years or so, where they divide them into area and REAPs. It used to just be area grants. They were all called area grants, but now the area grants are specifically the ones that are undergraduate focused, and the REAPs, the Research Enhancement Award Program, is for the health professional schools. So if you have an institute in mind, one of the things you want to do is click here and take a look to see what kinds of topics or specific information a given institute might provide to their R15 applicants. And not all of the 27 institutes and centers participate in an R15 NOFO. We'll look at those in a moment. But if they do, they may have really specific instructions for applicants about what specifically they are looking for or not looking for in terms of topics with their R15. So you definitely want to head over there and look to see if your target institute or institutes has that kind of information to provide with for you. The other thing is that there's this informational webinar video, which is okay. It's from June 15th, 2023. If you have absolutely no experience with R15s, this might be a good thing to watch. You could also just download the PowerPoint here if you don't want to spend an hour watching this. That's probably what I would do, because I don't think this is, sometimes NIH puts out really good videos. I don't think this is one of their top-notch versions of that. There are FAQs. So you could come here and take a look at general R15 questions, eligibility, et cetera, et cetera. So, and there are carrots here, so you can open them up and look at the questions and the answers. And then there is this handy dandy decision tree. If you're trying to figure out the eligibility of your organization and or your PI and whether you are REAP or area eligible. So, and again, I can't emphasize enough that there are instances when I have had clients at R15 ineligible universities and even divisions where they have been able to get their department designated as R15 eligible. So if you have any questions whatsoever on that, speak with a program officer. I do want to come over here and show you the active NOFOs. I think there were 4. Yeah. So, and this is just the classic, you know, if you've watched chapter 1 of any of my R or K series writing courses, you'll recognize this search engine to search for active NOFOs. And as always, there's a title, an issuing institute, the other institutes that participate, when it was released, when it expires, and the actual NOFO. And sometimes it is very specific. So some of these are REAPs. So there's a REAP, an area, and an area. And this is a PrEP, which is a very specific type of R15 that has fewer organizations involved in it. But like, let's take a look at, like, this one has been around a really long time, this GMS sponsored one. So let's take a look at this one. I hate these. I always go down to the actual. Let's look at the full announcement. Okay, so you can see this. I think this one has the most ICs participating. And you want to read this, but more importantly, you want to come down and take a look at the full text and read all of this information and the institute specific interests here. You want to take a look at that. And if you have any questions at all, let's see if they actually list agency contacts. But yeah, they do. A lot of NOFOs are not actually listing agency contacts. They're just giving general email addresses, which is very problematic to me. But here they actually list them. So what you would do is find your target institute. Like let's say your target institute is NCI, then you would contact this specific person with your questions. Probably your first question is, are we R15 eligible? And then, you might discuss with them your specific aims. You might discuss with them what your plan is for exposing students to careers in science to make sure that you're on the correct side of that line between like, this isn't mentoring or training, but it is exposing students to the research enterprise to stimulate interest in careers in science, and it is stimulating research on your campus, which is not, or in your department, which has not typically been focused heavily on research. Okay, so let's go back to, I think that was everything I wanted to show you. Yeah, and there's more information here, but that's where you're going to start in terms of if you're considering an R15. So I'm going to take a look at the Q&A and pull out the questions that are specific to R15 before we move to the non-R15 ones. Is it possible to submit an R15 application to any NIH program? In particular, can we submit to the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease? So just to be clear on the terminology, that is not a program. So they're called ICs or sometimes ICO, Institute Center Office. So those are areas within NIH. It's not a program, it's an institute. So what you would do is I'm actually just going to open it again to look at the active NOFOs to see if NIAID participates in any of them. And they do. It looks like they participate in 2 of them. So, and I'll just share my screen again really quickly for the sake of answering this question. But I just went back and looked at the, and I'm sure people know how to do this, but you would just enter your appropriate funding organization there. So in this case, it might be NIAID. And it's already filtering for R15, but you could have put R15 here. So these are the 2 that they participate in. So there's a REAP and an area, 1 each. So these are kind of the general REAP and area grants. So you could take a look at those. These are hyperlinked. You can take a look at those 2 NOFOs. So, okay, can you please send the link to the email contacts? I can get to that. I can't get to that part. So I'm not going to do that because you really need to know how to do this. So I'm going to show you how to do it again. And I actually also review that in chapter 1 of every single one of my writing courses. So let's just pick one. Trying to think of, I think you are the person who asked the question. I'm pretty sure is at an undergraduate focused institution. So let's head over to here. You're going to scroll down and go to the full announcement. The other thing you could do is just do an internet search on PAR 25-134, and it'll be the first hit that comes up. But in this instance, I'm going to click on that. And then to get to the contacts, you're going to always this is a NOFO, a Notice of Funding Opportunity. You're always going to go to Roman numeral 7, agency contacts. That's always what you're going to do, right? So here we are. We're at NOFO PAR 25-134. You're going to scroll down to Roman numeral 7. And for you, it's going to be, let's see. Here, NIAID. Oh, and unfortunately, they are sending you to a help desk, but they did provide the person's name. So my suggestion to the person who asked this is rather than send it to this general email, I would do an internet search on Carmen Moten, I would probably search Carmen Moten, PhD, NIH email address and see if you can get Carmen's direct email address because I I just don't find that sending an email to general email addresses, like training help desk, NIAID, like I just find that's not terribly helpful. You could probably just try Carmen.Moten because it looks like that is the naming convention for the people here, Karen McNamara, Lene Mudd, Scott Verberidge. I would just send it to Carmen.Moten at NIAID or NIH.gov. That's what I would do. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I think, does anybody have any other questions on the R15? I don't know if we have any other questions on that before. I think there are two more questions here, but I don't think that they are specific to the R15. Okay, I'm going to move on to the other questions. I watched the session in February on the new biosketch. Any more clarity about if the 5 products closely related to the project can also be cited in the contributions to science areas in addition to the 5 other significant products? Seems hard to fill out my areas of contributions with only 5 citations. Yeah, yes, I agree with that. I don't have more clarity on that. And I have not heard any colleagues who have gotten more clarity on that because the biosketch format was only soft launched in February and we don't have any reviews back on those yet. I would check with your pre-award support office, and I apologize, I don't remember which organization you're at. I'm not recognizing your name. But I would try your pre-award support office and see if they have any clarity on it. And try to remember, I know that with the contribution to science, like you, yeah, so ask, you come from a large R1, so I would ask the pre-award support office if they've been able to gather any intelligence on that. I have not had any luck shaking that information out of the tree. And I just don't know if it is known at this point. But it might be. I would check with your pre-award support office. But I do want to encourage you that yeah, and let me know if you learn anything. I do want to say that remember that you are going to include a link to your entire bibliography. So even if you can't you know, if you're in a situation where you aren't going to list, like in the olden days where you could list multiple citations for each contribution to science, you can still in the narrative section of the contribution to science, you can, without giving the contribution, you could just say in the text. And this resulted in, 3 publications, 2 of which were first author and 2 went into high impact journals. That's not a citation, but you're still it's like a backdoor way of giving some publication information. And your publications are going to be in the full bibliography. So these are kind of the workarounds that I'm kind of encouraging people to use in these situations where you can't give like the full citation, but there you can say something in the text about, and this contribution to science has resulted in X publications in this area, you know. And if it went into something really high impact, Science, Nature, New England Journal, PNAS, you could give the journal name. It went in as a senior author publication to PNAS in 2025. That's not a citation, that's text. So, yeah, I would, if it were me, that's probably what I would do just to be on the safe side. But having said that, because the instructions are murky and this is going to be the first cycle where they require people to do it, it's extremely unlikely that they're going to disqualify people for something, like there's going to be confusion about what to do here. And they're just not, I can't see them disqualifying people for some people understanding the instructions one way and some understanding it a different way. So for whatever that's worth. But to be on the safe side, if it were me, that's what I would do. I would use a workaround in the text. So Okay, other questions? While I wait for any other questions, I know that not a lot of people are at R15 organizations who come to us. Like most of the clients who come to us are usually at R1s. That's where people have budget to buy services like my membership. But as luck would have it, we do have two teams right now that are R15 eligible. And you never know when you're going to be R15 at an R15 eligible situation in the future. So it's always good to know this information. How can we include an NIH funded investigator from another institution who can guide us? And what role should we designate this person in the proposal for budgetary purposes? So I don't work on budgets, so I don't want to speak to that part, but you can include an NIH funded investigator from another institution, like as other key personnel. They could be a co-investigator or a consultant, but people have co-investigators at other organizations all the time. So that's a pretty straightforward way to do that. And in fact, if you are in a situation where you're R15 eligible, or if you have not a lot of resources at your organization, even if it's not R15 eligible, one way to increase your capacity and your bandwidth is by partnering with an organization that has more, by bringing somebody in as a co-investigator. That's one way to do that. So, how you handle the budget piece of that is a question for your pre-award support office. I'm not really sure how to do that, but certainly tons of people have R-level applications where they have co-Is at other organizations. I submitted a Renewal R01 in March and am preparing the new publications list to submit before the review next month. Am I correct to assume these can be any papers that show productivity and skills, even if they weren't funded specifically by the previous R01 being renewed? I believe that is the case, but I would double check that with your pre-award support office and just make sure, because they handle that kind of thing much more frequently than I do. So I would just double check that with them. But I believe you are right that it's productivity in general, and often it's honestly just kind of hard to tease out exactly what is funded by what, if you have more than one funding source. So I think you're right, but just double check that with your pre-award support office. Okay, other questions? While I'm waiting to see if anybody has any other questions, because we've had some people have left, others have come on the call since we started. I'm just going to remind people that on Friday is May 1st, and we have I have my virtual office hours the first Friday of every month. It's called First Fridays. And the sign up for that is in the chat right now. You do have to sign up for that separately. So you don't get an immediate registration for that when you sign up. So if anybody you can sign up for it and not come. It's just a way of opening your invitation, so that you get a reminder about that Zoom event. So it's first Friday of every month, 11:30 Eastern. It's open office hours. It's not recorded. It's very casual. You can come and go as you like. You can drop in and lurk and listen to other people's questions, or you can come and discuss your specific circumstances with me. Apologies, this is not about R15. Apologies for this specific question, and feel free to defer if too specific for this session. I'm confused about the genomic data sharing policy, even after reviewing the overview page. If I'm doing RNA sequencing on a well-characterized, this is going to be too specific. So I can already tell this is going to be too specific. So I am going to ask Alexander if you could email that to me. First off, we did a tutorial on this, so I don't know if you have checked out the tutorial on the genomic sharing data sharing policy. But we did do a tutorial on it. You could take a look at your bonus mini tutorial course on your course dashboard and look for that topic. I think it was last year. The presenter would have been, I think it was Becky, who was our presenter. Yeah, I think it was Becky Miro. Okay, he's saying, no, didn't see that tutorial. I will review the bonus tutorial courses and review. But also feel free, if you look at the bonus tutorial on that, because the policy changed on this recently. And whenever there are policy changes, we try to do tutorials on them. At least one to introduce the policy change, and then we usually do another one like a year later, like what are the lessons learned now that we've seen some summary statements on them. But check out, it would have been presented by Rebecca Miro, and I think it was about a year ago. But if you still have a question after that, then feel free to email me the question at meg@bouviergrant.com. So yeah, I'll see. And actually, I have Riley, do you want to see if you can find that tutorial and we could give him a date? The topic would be a new genomic data sharing policy, and Becky would have been the one to present it. And I feel like it was about a year ago. Maybe it'll be easy to pull up. So Riley will see if she can find the date for that. And meanwhile, we have we have a few more that have come in. This may be irrelevant to the meeting subject. I understand this is not, and people can ask non-R15 questions. It's perfectly fine. I understand this is not included in the current membership, but are there alternative options or opportunities for a consultation meeting with you to get feedback on my draft? Not on a draft, no. So I will say that you can get one-on-one feedback from me on your grantsmanship strategy by coming on the first Friday of every month to my open office hours or asking questions here. But I think first Fridays is probably the better place for that, to come and, you can speak. We can talk about your grantsmanship strategy, but I cannot touch a draft. That is a completely different contract, and I am full for that service. I'm not taking new clients for that service. And even if I were, those contracts are held in a central office for an entire university. They're not for an individual. So the only other thing I could do is I think like a year ago, I did do a live edit to an Ames page or two as part of AGE. So that is a possibility. So the way that works, and in case anybody has not been around and doesn't know this, when I do the live edit to the Ames page, what you could do is send me your Ames page ahead of time. I would edit it ahead of the session and share the track changes with you so that you could see the edited version. I would probably also make suggestions for portions that should be anonymized so that the confidentiality of the idea is protected. And sometimes people will just send me like the narrative overview to edit. But basically you're agreeing to allow me to do a live edit at a live stream like this, which is then on our open YouTube channel and in our course library. So you have to be a little careful with that, either by just giving me the narrative overview or by giving me the whole thing, but like maybe blacking out the specifics of the aims or that kind of thing. And as I said, I do the edit ahead of time so that I can share it with you, so that if there's anything about the edit that is making you uncomfortable, that isn't aired. We can figure it out ahead of time. So that's the one thing that I could do in terms of working on a draft. But yeah, typically I can't touch anybody's draft unless your organization has an editing and advising contract, and I'm not taking new ones. And even when I do, they're held at central offices for large groups of applicants. Okay, let's see. Some people at another institution want me to be a co-investigator on their R15. However, this would require me to be PI on the subcontract. I read that being a PI on a subcontract counts towards your 6 grant limit if we can submit as a PI each year, even if your role on the R15 is small and only co-I worthy. Is there any way to argue against this or push NIH to change this policy, since this will make people not want to collaborate as a co-I on other grants across institutions? That is such a good question, and I did not realize that being a PI on a sub-site actually counts toward that 6 grant limit. So the first suggestion that I have is to make sure that's true. I don't know where you heard that information. And it's the kind of thing that I could picture differing from institute to institute because it's like one of those gray area interpretations of a policy, of a recent policy, because the 6 grant limit is a policy that was implemented like a year ago. And for those who don't know, this is actually, I talk about this in Master the R series. I think at the beginning of chapter 3 or 2, where it was actually the 6 grant limit as PI per calendar year is bundled together with the notice about not using AI on grants. And it came about because there were a tiny fraction of people who were submitting like 40 grants a year as a PI. So NIH came out and said, no, you can't use AI at all on your grant application ever, period, the end. And you can only submit 6 applications per calendar year as PI, which doesn't sound like a lot unless they're counting this, if you, the being PI on a subsite. That's really problematic. So I would ask your institute program officer, whoever the PO is on this particular grant, and I would ask, this is one instance where I would ask by email, not by phone, because you want it in writing. So I would email the PO for whatever institute you're targeting for this R01, and I would say to them, I am going to be a co-investigator on a June R01, and we're designating your institute as primary. As a co-investigator at a different institution, I am technically the PI on a subsite for the R01. Does that count toward my 6 grant limit as PI? And I think it's 6 R01s. I don't think it's the R21s. So does it count toward my 6 grant limit per calendar year? And get it in writing to see what they say. If they say, yes, it does, then that's an opportunity to write back and say, okay, then I can't do it. And just so you know, this is going to cause people not to want to participate as co-investigators. Like you're killing collaboration is what that amounts to, right? Because in theory, NIH wants organizations to be collaborating different, not just on R15s, but on a regular R01. Like, don't you want, different universities to be pooling their expertise and resources in innovative ways to strengthen team science and to maximize the resources available at American research institutions? So if that is true, it's going to really kill collaborations between universities, and that is indeed hugely problematic. Not just for R15s, but for R01s in general. And so that would be an opportunity for you to air that concern and say, like, this is going to make people not want to collaborate to be a co-I on somebody's R01, if you're at a different institution. And if they say, nope, it doesn't count toward the limit, then you've got it in writing. Right. So if you wind up submitting 7 this calendar year and NIH wags a finger at you, you can pull up your email and say, hey, this wasn't, I was told specifically by this program officer that it wasn't a problem. So you want to get that in writing. So, wow, first I've heard that, and now I'm concerned and will love to know your answer when you hear back from a program officer on that. So that's worrisome indeed. Okay, I think I have cleared all the questions. I'm going to stay on for another minute or two. And again, I'll just remind people the sign up for my open office hours, first Fridays, is in the chat right now. And that is day after tomorrow, May 1st at 11:30 Eastern, just a very casual drop-in, not recorded, no presentations, no guests, just me chatting with people about their grant applications. What else? The next 2 sessions, I'm just looking to see what is what's in there. Yeah, so she just reposted the first Fridays. And then the next two sessions for Ask the Grant Writing Expert for this are going to be pure Q&A, which is what I typically do in deadline months. So the two sessions in May, which are really, usually very intensive periods, will be to answer questions for the June and July applicants. So it's just pure Q&A. Looking ahead to upcoming sessions, we're booked for many months now, and I will say we have some really exciting topics coming up. So since the SBIR STTR program was reauthorized at NIH, I did schedule some sessions for people to come talk to us about SBIRs on all different aspects on that. Like if you have an idea, how do you start to put together some non-dilutive funding? What's an overview of the SBIR program at NIH? That kind of thing. I have somebody from CDMRP coming to talk to us about the Army portfolio. Um, I'm going to be talking about T32s because I just finished that course update. I scheduled a session on the PF5, which was one of the things that was requested. Yeah, so lots of, and we're going to do a reboot of the, like, what do we know about the simplified review framework? Now that we're like a year and a half into seeing summary statements on them. So we're going to be doing that as well. And NIH issued a website about like what reviewers think of the simplified review framework. So we're going to be looking at that. But the next two sessions, pure Q&A. So, okay. So I think that's it. I hope to see some of you on Friday. If anybody who's watching this video is interested in Master the T32, that is available. If you're watching this as a recording on my YouTube channel, that's available for purchase at my website, bouviergrant.com. And yeah, and otherwise, I hope to see members either on Friday at open office hours or 2 weeks from today at the Q&A session, as the French would say, courage. And I will wish you all good grant writing, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.